I know you. You're that jaywalking punk anarchist.
You're that jaywalking punk anarchist. Jaywalking punk anarchist.
Hello, this is the Radical Reviewer, taking a look at capitalism and the non-aggression principle. The non-aggression principle, or NAP, is defined as an ethical stance asserting that aggression is inherently wrong. In this context, aggression is defined as initiating or threatening any forcible interference with an individual or individual's property. Capitalism is defined as an economic system based on the private ownership of the means of production and their operation for profit. Characteristics central to capitalism include private property, capital accumulation, wage labor, voluntary exchange, a price system, and competitive markets. Okay, so let's see if capitalism violates this non-aggression principle. Well, capitalism is characterized as private ownership of property, and property is theft, and theft is aggression. Case closed. Okay, let's look at it a little closer. Private ownership of land is theft. Let's take a square of land, let's say 50 acres. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let's say I want to own this part by the river and build a factory that uses the water. Or maybe I want to privately own this piece of land and cut down the trees to sell for lumber. Now, some problems emerge. 1. What happens to the land has far-reaching implications. Perhaps my riverside factory limits access to water, or pollutes the water. Perhaps the deforestation leads to increased landslides and flooding, etc., etc. These impacts are certainly aggressive. 2. You can only do so much with a piece of land. Choosing to do one thing means you can't do another. You can't have a factory, a landfill, a quarry, a school, a parking lot, and a public park occupying the same plot of land. This too affects other people, again, perhaps aggressively affecting them. 3. By privately owning land which produces profit, I can pass that profit down through the generations, so that each generation increasingly unfairly benefits from my initial theft of the land, as the Morgans and Rockefellers and DuPonts and other family dynasties certainly demonstrate. 4. There's only so much land, and even less of that land is prime real estate with access to a river or a forest or a precious metals, for example. So why is it that I get the land and not someone else? In fact, let's look at all the land that is currently in private hands. Okay, so who owned that land before the current owner? Okay, what about before them? And before them? And before them? If you look, any land that claims to be owned by private hands was at one point unowned. And that's the trick. Unowned is just a fallacious term for owned by everyone, or owned in common. So any private ownership of land is in fact stolen land, stolen from everyone else. Hence Proudhon's famous anarchist phrase, property is theft. Let's take this one step further. Private ownership of the means of production is theft. Okay, so you might grant that property is theft, but what about man-made things like a factory? Certainly that can be privately owned. Well, let's see what Peter Kropotkin has to say about it.
There is not even a thought or an invention which is not common property, born of the past in the present. Every new invention is a synthesis, the result of innumerable inventions which have preceded it in the vast field of mechanics and industry.
Hence, Kropotkin's famous anarchist phrase, all is made by all. Okay, well, if private ownership of land or the means of production is theft, then who protects or enforces this theft? Why wouldn't the victims of this theft resist? Well, because of the state. The state is required to enforce the theft that is taking the collectively owned land and collectively produced means of production and artificially converting it into private property.
Hey, wait a minute.
I hear you ask.
If capitalism requires a state, then that would mean anarcho-capitalism is an oxymoron.
Let's look at ANCAPs for a second. So-called anarcho-capitalists often ask,
hey, in your anarcho-communist society, couldn't I make a small area that has capitalism, or would you force me to not be a capitalist?
This loaded question implies that anarcho-communism is contradictory, because either A, you let people become capitalist and so you fail at communism, or B, you forcefully stop them from becoming capitalists and so you fail at anarchism. But this question is flawed on two grounds. One, As I already demonstrated, it is capitalism that is enacting force, with the theft and violence of stealing what is collectively owned and produced in order to privately profit from it. And 2, no one would work for you. When I go to work at my minimum wage job, I do so under wage slavery, but not under chattel slavery. If the store I worked for offered chattel slavery or sweatshop conditions as the conditions of work, they'd get laughed out of town. Not because I think I'm better than the people who suffered under those working conditions, but because there has been decades of working class people fighting against capitalism, and they have secured better working conditions. In this same way, no one living in an anarcho-communist society would need to force you not to start a capitalist workplace, because just like how I refuse to work under chattel slavery, no one would work for you. No one would leave their equitable, democratic, inclusive, collaborative lives in order to work in an alienating, antisocial, class warfare propagating capitalist workplace for the wonderful benefit of letting you steal their labor. In summation, capitalism is characterized by private ownership of property, and property is theft, and theft is aggressive. Capitalism violates the non-aggression principle. So yeah, ANCAPs, libertarians, classical liberals, etc., stop supporting the aggressive theft of our collective labor and our common property, and join us to fight to protect it. While we're on this subject, let's look at a few other things capitalism totally fails at. Capitalism doesn't reward hard work. It's a common myth that if you work hard, your hard work will be rewarded, but market economies often reward things that have nothing to do with hard work. Simply owning productive land or a productive factory does not require hard work. Owning shares in a successful corporation does not require hard work. Inheriting a successful copyright does not require hard work, etc., etc. But even more than this, in the most basic sense, hard work is not rewarded. Let's look at an example.
You just got out of high school. You were going straight to the coal mine, okay? Right into the coal mine. And you're going to earn, let's say, I don't know, 60,000 euros, okay, in the coal mine. You're going to college, and then you're going to medical school, and then you're going to be an intern, and then you're going to be a surgeon. And Thatcher tells us that to follow that disastrously debilitating and hurtful path, right, we have to pay you 600,000 euros. Right? So to get you to go to college instead of the coal mine, and medical school instead of the coal mine, and to be an intern instead of the coal mine, we have to then give you 600,000 euros a year for the rest of your life as a surgeon. That's what they are telling us, right? So with those students, I just always do a little test. I'm going to start lowering your salary, okay? You tell me when you're going to forgo college and everything else and go into the coal mine because I'm paying you too little. 600, 500, 400, 300, 200, 100, 80, 60, 50, you're not sure. You're a little quicker than the US. The US invariably, and it's incredible because 2 minutes before, everybody in the room is absolutely certain that I'm crazy. And then 2 minutes after, the person is asking me, how low can I live on? Thus revealing the accurate truth that they don't want to be in that coal mine, quite smartly.
You may have heard the common saying, if wealth was an inevitable result of hard work, every woman in Africa would be a millionaire. Phrases like this point to the ridiculousness of the notion that capitalism is a meritocracy. Capitalism doesn't promote well-being. Capitalism promotes a race to the bottom. Any benefit you can get as a worker is a cost to business. I've said this before and I'll say it again. Your boss wants you to work as hard as possible for as little pay as possible, and you want the exact opposite. Mandating employees get benefits, that costs the business money and makes them unable to compete with companies who don't give their employees benefits. Your state votes to provide adequate unemployment insurance? That would cause workers to be less fearful of being fired and less susceptible to company demands, which makes the company less competitive. You became a nurse because you enjoy helping people? The goal of a privately owned hospital is to make as much money as possible, and that means cutting the number of staff to the bare minimum. Good luck enjoying helping people as one of only 3 nurses on your floor. I could keep going, but I think you get the point. Basically, if it's good for business, it's bad for people. And this affects all aspects of the economy, from what kinds of social services are available to the most basic worker, manager, and owner interactions. All companies are in this race to the bottom.
So why don't you get a different job?
Because all jobs are in this race to the bottom. The difference between jobs is negligible, especially in our current economy.
So why don't you start your own business?
Well, for one, you would still face this antisocial competitive race to the bottom when it comes to the treatment of your employees. But also, you can't start a business. This concept that if you don't like your job, you can find a new one, and if there's no good jobs, you can start your own business, is total BS, and anyone who's spent any significant time in the workforce knows this. 1, starting a business is prohibitively expensive, and don't go on saying that,
But it's all the taxes that make it expensive. It's the state's fault, not capitalism.
yeah, certainly taxes, permits, etc. are strenuous and costly, but as anyone can tell you, whether it's maintaining a storefront or a very low-cost online service of some kind, businesses have tremendous startup costs, far beyond simply taxes and permits. And this brings us to 2, in our current state of global monopoly capitalism, your little startup company's ability to compete with giant multinational corporations is very slim, as seen by a friend of mine who lost their coffee shop to a brand new Starbucks, or another friend of mine who lost their convenience store to a neighboring Target, and any other small business that has been outcompeted by a giant corporation. What voluntary exchange is, aka you can't eat debt. This probably sounds familiar if you've seen Compatriot Slime's wonderful video on the subject, but let's look at this idea again here anyway. We come to the market with very different needs. This concept that it's just a voluntary, fair, and equal exchange is ridiculous. Yeah, you come to the market looking for work, and Walmart comes to the market looking for workers. No one is forcing anyone, it's a totally voluntary, fair exchange. Well, except you're coming to the market as a flesh and blood living thing that needs food, clothes, and shelter every day. And Walmart is a business that does need employees, but they don't need any specific employees, and they've secured enough wealth to go months with inadequate levels of employees. So with so many people unemployed competing with you for a job, and with the lack of a social safety net, as mentioned in the Capitalism Doesn't Promote Well-Being section, and the restrictions on starting your own business covered in the You Can't Start a Business section, your immediate demand for food, clothes, and shelter, and Walmart's demand that at some point in the coming months or even years, a few new employees can join their ranks to work as hard as possible for as little pay as possible, well, this exchange starts looking a whole hell of a lot less voluntary. This is fun. Let's keep this going. Capitalism doesn't promote innovation. This one's easy. Capitalism is all about cutting costs and the bottom line. They're not going to waste money on attempting the very costly adventure of inventing something new, which is why they predominantly don't. Typically, it's research and development grants, contracts for military scientists, grants for college scientists, etc., etc. Sometimes it's some guy in a garage with a small loan creating something new and selling it to a large company. Capitalism won't pay for it, which is why new inventions come from taxpayer money at public expense. Capitalism doesn't price things properly. We saw this in regards to labor with the doctor and coal miner example, but actually capitalism misprices all products because it doesn't account for the true costs of things. If a product was made unethically, something like 60% of the chocolate on the market is a product of slavery, or whether it has a major environmental impact, like fracking making water unsafe to drink, these things are kept out of the price of the product as externalities. And there are plenty of other price-affecting implications that occur, such as if an item is restricted by monopoly ownership, or artificially inflated because it's an essential medical need, or inflated due to a ridiculous copyright law, etc., etc. Capitalism doesn't make what we want or need. This one is too easy. What do we want? Affordable medicine, housing, food, etc. Do we get that? No. What do we get? Over 200 types of toothbrushes, gold-topped pizza, and other nonsense products that we don't want or need? And often when we do get products that we want, they're ruined by cash grab corporate desires for mass appeal and profits. And don't even get me started on advertisements. Okay, so I think that about covers it. Most of my critique here can be found in David Harvey's 17 Contradictions in the End of Capitalism, and Michael Albert's Perry Con, Life After Capitalism, as well as Peter Kropotkin's The Conquest of Bread. My critiques also come from my personal experience at various jobs over the last 15 plus years, working customer service and maintenance and freight and sales, etc., at various fast food vendors, homeless shelters, thrift stores, grocery stores, and various small businesses. Working class folks who support anarcho-capitalism or neoliberalism or some other hyper-capitalism, people who support a capitalist economy though they totally lack or have any chance of actually owning any capital, they seem like some bizarre exaggeration of the old Steinbeck quote,
"The poor see themselves not as an exploded. Yes. You don't know why that's funny. I don't know why you're laughing. The poor see themselves not as an exploited The poor see themselves not as an exploited proletariat, but as temporarily embarrassed millionaires."
Psst, Dapperton, my 2 cents, esoteric entity, and all you other cartoon avatar ANCAPs. You do realize that to be a capitalist would require owning some capital, right? The capitalists out there who actually own the means of production, the factories, the resources, the corporations, the multi-millionaire and billionaire entrepreneurs, they find your obsequious adherence to capitalism amusing, but they definitely don't see you as like-minded peers. In fact, they'd use their security guards and company goons against you the minute you ask for a fair shake. So instead I ask, please abandon your delusions about capitalism and join us. Though I suspect you would rather join fascism. Anyway, if you're interested in radical theory, looking for a book recommendation or whatever, you can get your radical reviews here with the Radical Reviewer. Thanks for watching.
Turn their homes into collective housing. Yeah, their fears into reality. Yeah, they won't share what they've got. So you take what you need. Yeah, they won't share what they've got. So you take what you need.